Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Hello? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello, valued viewer. Now that I've had a couple of months to absorb and reflect on the latest Scream installment, and being that one of the focuses of this YouTube channel is Scream analysis, I'd like to share some of my thoughts on the latest film. Less from a self-contained movie review perspective, since plenty of other channels and outlets are already doing that, but instead how it fits into this fantastic and growing horror series. Because Scream movies are known for several different aspects, from unforgettable opening scenes to jaw-dropping killer reveals, I thought it'd be fun to rank each Scream movie by category. Being that there's 5 Scream films and counting, I therefore chose 5 categories to rank, from least favorite to favorite. The series is known for the first scene, which always gets the ball rolling at lightning speed and never slows down until the killers are finally put to rest. Thus, category 1 will be a ranking of all 5 opening scenes. Since the franchise has numerous characters, far more fleshed out than your typical horror movie, the second category will be top 5 characters. Please note that I'm choosing to do top 5 characters of the overall series, not per film. This will allow characters who appear in numerous Scream movies to be analyzed on their own merit. Category number 3 will be top 5 deaths. Again, this will be of the entire series, so unfortunately, there will be a Scream film in this category that gets snubbed. Our penultimate category will be top 5 killer reveals. Since each film, aside from Scream 3, has a duo of killers, one murderer's reveal might be more shocking than another's. So, this category will be per killer across the entire series, not a team of killers. And yes, another Scream film will definitely get snubbed in this category. And finally, favorite trilogy. The franchise can arguably be broken down into 5 different trilogies. I never noticed this until Redditor Scream Legacy posted on the Scream subreddit, and I instantly thought the observation was brilliant. It goes without saying, this is all subjective. But I also want to point out that I'm not trying to persuade anyone to change their opinion. In making these Scream analysis videos, I'm just trying to spread the love and knowledge of this great series. And in response to my previous Scream videos, a lot of viewers have shared things about Scream that I never knew. When I make these videos, I also learn something new about Scream. So if you disagree with my rankings, and I guarantee you will, please leave a comment with your rankings because I'm curious to know, from one Scream fan to another, how you came to your opinion. These types of discussions really help the series live on long after it's done making money for the studios. Also, if you're new to the channel, please check out my other Scream videos and make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell, and share. Lastly, for the sake of simplicity, Scream 1996 will be referred to as Scream 1 and Scream 2022 will be referred to as Scream 5. Now, we got a lot to cover, so without further ado,
It's showtime.
Scream 2 cuts in with the extremely sad death of Maureen Evans, and Jada absolutely nails the pain and terror of someone going through such an experience. From the bulging veins in her neck to the look of helplessness as she gazes upon the crowd of ghost faces, Maureen's death excellently captures how wrong things can go when life imitates art. The opening is also memorable for introducing Stab to the series, and without Stab, Screams 3, 4, and 5 would be completely different films, if they'd even exist. However, the desensitized card is played with way too much confidence in this scene, that it crosses a bit too deep into the impossible territory. Imagine if a movie was made about the Columbine shooting, and the studio gave out free trench coats to cheerful viewers at its premiere. Furthermore, things fall into place way too perfectly for the killer in this scene. How did the killer know Phil needed to use the bathroom? How did the killer know the urinals would be occupied and that Phil would be forced to use a stall? What was the plan if Maureen and Phil actually decided to go see Sandra Bullock? The whole reason to kill them then and there was so that they were at the Stab premiere. To give screenwriters Guy Busick and James Vanderbilt their due credit, there's very few things left to shock an audience in the opening scene when the series is 5 movies in. To some viewers, allowing the opening victim to live was a shock. To others, including yours truly, it was just one of few options left to try out. Even still, the conversation between Tara and Ghostface, especially regarding elevated horror, is absolutely terrific. The fake-out openings of Scream 4 are fantastic and are used as a brilliant way to reintroduce the audience, after an 11-year gap, to a universe obsessed with stab. Unfortunately, the actual kills of Jenny and Marnie aren't any more realistic, memorable, or emotional than the faked stab deaths. And this leaves first-time viewers thinking it's another fake-out, which admittedly could have been intentional, but it leaves repeated viewers forever underwhelmed. Love it or hate it, there's a lot to be discussed about Scream 3, from its complicated development to the final product, and even its legacy. But a chunk of the divisiveness is the result of Aaron Kruger stepping in for Kevin Williamson. Kruger is an excellent screenwriter, which is no doubt how he got the job, but it became very apparent that he and Williamson are just two completely different types of writers, inevitably making Scream 3 the ugly duckling of the franchise. With that being said, Scream 3's opening, with its clever back and forth between Cotton and the killer, Cotton rushing through Hollywood traffic to try and save his girlfriend, the subtle clue that Cotton sacrificed himself to keep Sydney's whereabouts a secret, and how the opening events perfectly force the survivors to get involved again. This scene's perfect balance of action and scares makes it feel like it was written by Williamson himself. A predictable choice for such an unpredictable scene. At the time of its release, Drew Barrymore was basically marketed as the star of the whole movie. While she certainly owned that opening scene, the fact that she was killed right from the get-go caused audiences to have to disregard any expectation they had about this movie. But to add to that, seeing the victim as someone's daughter added a dose of realism and heightened emotion that it's a scene you can't unsee. Similar to Drew Barrymore being marketed as the main character, Rose McGowan could easily be mistaken as playing the cliché bimbo with the death wish if you had just stuck to the trailers. However, Tatum Riley is revealed to be smart, quick-witted, and a well-versed movie buff who can talk some trash and even has the dignity to tell her close friend what she really thinks. Listen closely and you can hear Tatum cry out for her mother as she's about to die. McGowan wanted her character to have an emotional impact on viewers, instead of just being some cardboard cutout that gets killed in a horror movie. And the impact lives on long after Tatum's death.
And I said, can I please say mom before the final thing? Because I really was dedicated to the fact that I didn't want Tatum to be a disposable blonde with big boobs, whatever, on screen that would just, be another kill. I wanted people to be like feel like their friend was gone and someone that they had empathy for, and that's something that's very lacking in a lot of horror films. You don't generally care. You're just like oh wow, that was a cool death.
Sidney Prescott is a prime example of how you don't have to be a bodybuilder or black belt to be an absolute savage. When she fights, it's primal. It's not done for money, a trophy, or a belt, but for the instinct to survive. There's an added grittiness to her scrapping when you remember that one of the reasons she keeps coming out on top is because she's letting out all that repressed anger and grief from the untimely deaths of her mother and friends. What also makes Sydney such a compelling leading lady is her imperfection. She falsely identified Cotton Weary as her mother's killer, and if she had gotten it right in the first place, maybe nobody else would have gotten murdered. She's forced to live with that knowledge, and it humanizes her character even more. Even if Stu wasn't the killer, he'd still be one of the greatest characters of the franchise. But the fact that the clownish boyfriend of Tatum also has a sinister side that's strangely just as humorous makes him significantly more intriguing. To add a final layer to Stu Macher's greatness is the fact that a lot of his most memorable lines were ad-libbed by Matthew Lillard.
Did you really call the police?
You bet your sorry ass I did.
My mom and dad are gonna be so mad.
Gale Weathers is an example of how a lot of characters in this franchise are multi-layered, and she's one of the reasons Scream is a horror series that truly goes above and beyond evolving the people that live in its universe. With each installment, Gale presents herself as a cutthroat and selfish journalist to the point that it's so easy to suspect her of orchestrating the murders just so she can have a story. However, when shit hits the fan, Gale not only fights to save herself, but also to save others. And is she not the greatest screamer of all? Number 1 should be pretty obvious to returning viewers of this channel, but I thought an honorable mention in this category is warranted since Dewey is such a beloved character. And don't get me wrong, I love Dewey too in Scream 1, but I feel that the sequels progressively dumbed down his character. He could be very useless. David Arquette's character basically suffers from what Simpsons fans call flanderization, when a single element of a character's personality becomes inflated over time to the point that it's a primary defining characteristic for the worse. In order to not draw this video out and to avoid repeating myself, I'll make this brief. Jamie Kennedy excellently captured a movie geek to the point that anyone who loves film can identify with him. He was the in-universe viewer, working the mystery out loud just like the audience would piece things together in their head. And Randy was right. In each of the first 3 Scream movies, Randy, in some form or another, reveals who the killers are. For a more in-depth analysis on Randy, please see the video on my channel entitled The Best Supporting Character of Horror. Despite my earlier criticism of sequel Dewey, I'd be remiss if I didn't put his death on the list. Directors Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette do a terrific job capturing the emotional impact of one of the big 3 getting killed. The mood alone is spot on, plus the way the camera hovers over Dewey's face for the audience to get a long glimpse at his dead eyes. And it concludes with his final stroll on a stretcher, but this time he's in a body bag. Ouch, right in the feelings. The reason I don't rank this higher, however, is because in typical sequel Dewey fashion, this great death is the result of some very contrived writing. Just because Dewey is a bumbling goofball doesn't mean he's an absolute idiot. So why write him to get off the elevator with the intention of shooting the killer, only for him to stupidly stand a couple of feet away when the job could have been done from a farther distance, even by a horrible shooter, and he gets distracted by a ringing phone? Furthermore, how is it that the killer regains consciousness at the perfect time? You don't just snap back like that after being knocked out. And even if Ghostface was pretending to be unconscious, how did the killer know Gale would call Dewey to distract him at that exact moment? It just doesn't feel right for a character who's been around for 25 years to die as a result of the killer having the speed of a cheetah to spring into consciousness at the perfect moment.
Yeah, it's awfully convenient.
Whether or not Judy's lemon squares tasted like ass, it's sad to know she won't be protecting Woodsboro anymore. In Scream 4, her innocence made her kinda creepy, and she was even made more suspicious by having a backstory which merged with the original plan to have for Angelina Tyler as Sydney's former classmate and partner in crime to Roman Bridger. Yes, Scream 3 was originally supposed to have 2 killers. But when it's revealed that Judy's gentle nature was genuine, there was just no way she was going to make it out of Scream 5 alive. Even still, the entire scene that intensely pairs her death with her son Wes's hits every checklist of a great Scream death, the most underrated of which is a daytime murder. The way Ghostface pops out of nowhere in broad daylight is reminiscent of Michael Myers, and the eeriness of such a heinous death is a cruel reminder that some of the world's most despicable acts weren't done at night, but rather out in the open for all to see. Cotton Weary certainly had a lot of potential to grow as a character by the end of Scream 2. There was a fanfic script of Scream 3 floating around in 1998, 1999, in which Sidney and Cotton actually end up together. As awkward as that would have been, it was very well written, and it demonstrated that there were countless directions Cotton's character could have gone. He went from accused killer on death row at the beginning of Scream 1 to the celebrated hero at the end of Scream 2. And so Scream 3 could have done everything in between with that. But at the same time, it's also fitting that all that was really left for him after that fame, both good and bad, was a highly publicized death. While we can wonder what might have been, what we got is near perfect and is easily my favorite scene of Scream 3. I'll never forget how surprised I was when Randy died. I didn't see his death coming at all. Maybe it was because he was the first survivor to not get so lucky in a sequel. Maybe it was because Randy was built up to be the leading man. Maybe it was because Randy was the rules guy and thus knew how to survive. Maybe it was because he was killed in broad daylight. I don't know. All I remember is that I was shocked. And the fact that a horror movie made me feel something other than being scared spoke to the genius of both the acting and the writing. And speaking of genius acting and writing, if I were to write 1,000 books, I could never come close to the brilliance of that opening scene in Scream 1. As gruesome as it is, there's also something magical in Williamson's writing to balance the humor, the scares, the violence, and the emotion all in one scene. The superb script is guided from screenplay to film by the genius direction of the one and only Wes Craven. And of course, Drew Barrymore deserves every bit of credit for bringing Casey Becker to life and then death. I told you this list was going to be controversial, but let me explain. John Milton's house is set up in a way which allows the killer to pop out of nowhere, traveling through secret passages in the gigantic mansion, with it all ending in a secret home theater. This makes it look like there must be two killers. So, when it's revealed there's only one killer, there's definitely an element of surprise that needs to be given credit, though it's admittedly a bit anticlimactic. When it's revealed that Roman did it, you think back and wonder why Gale couldn't read a pulse. But when you replay the scene and see that Roman was putting pressure on his artery, everything clicks.
I remember being in the cutting room and talking about it, and you actually did it for me to show me how it would work.
Well, that's true, yeah. We had him
and it completely worked. It was like, my God, you have no pulse.
Yeah, you just put pressure on your artery running down the inside of your arm by your armpit, and there you go with no pulse. But that's very hard for the killer to explain in the middle of the very few ending moments of the film.
Furthermore, Roman's backstory works its way into the death of Maureen Prescott, which set everything in motion without actually retconning any of the events in Scream 1, even if they were clearly thought up after the fact. One of the greatest things about the Scream series is that even a know-it-all, like yours truly, gets stumped. Unfortunately, Stu being the killer was way too obvious. He was always absent when Ghostface was around. Unlike other killers I found obvious, particularly Mickey, Amber, and Richie, Stu gets a place on this list because of the fact that it was revealed the whole thing was a team effort, which is now expected out of the sequels. But back in 1996, when there hadn't been an established Scream formula, it was a shocking surprise that neatly tied everything together. All I can say is that Emma Roberts nailed the performance as the new Sidney, only for the ending to flip on us, revealing that she was actually the new Billy. As such, Emma Roberts ended up honoring both Billy and Sidney very well. Jill's reasons for killing, however, isn't quite an excellent enough motive to breach the trilogy and reopen the door for more Ghostface, but it's still good enough to make Scream 4 a fun and scary self-contained story that's worth a rewatch every few years. Similar to Emma Roberts, Laurie Metcalf nails the performance as Billy's mother, who wants nothing more than good old-fashioned revenge. Not too over the top, but convincingly livid, Metcalf nails this performance so well that it's tainted the way I look at Aunt Jackie forever. An added element is the fact that her character was foreshadowed in the first movie, making Scream 2 meant to be. Like I've said on this channel before, Skeet Ulrich is absolutely brilliant as Billy Loomis. Between him trickling in subtle clues through facial expressions to just going all out after the reveal, Billy will forever be the OG Ghostface. From Sidney's distrust to Sheriff Burke's dislike and even all of Randy's accusations, Billy was clearly the prime suspect, that it was too obvious for him to actually be the killer. And that was all put to rest when audiences saw Ghostface kill him. So, when it was revealed that he was indeed the killer, and how it all came together, and all the little clues you see upon rewatch, this revelation couldn't have been more surprising or satisfying. Maybe others feel differently about thinking of the series in groups of trilogies, but I thought this observation was genius. Thanks again, Redditor Scream Legacy. The 5 trilogies are the original trilogy, Screams 1 through 3, the Woodsboro trilogy, the 3 films which take place in Woodsboro, so Screams 1, 4, and 5, the Roberts trilogy, the 3 films which deal with Maureen and/or her side of the family, Screams 1, 3, and 4. The Loomis trilogy, the 3 films featuring a Loomis, Screams 1, 2, and 5. And the Origin Story trilogy, the 3 films that are significantly impacted by events that occurred before Casey Becker's death, Screams 1, 3, and 5. I admit putting this pick as number 5 might be unpopular as of this video's making, but I think fans might come around to also lowering this trilogy as time goes on. The main reason being, returning to Woodsboro is a lack of progress. It's not used to move the series forward, nor is there a good reason of it being set there in Screams 4 and 5 other than bringing things back to the original, which is a cliche a lot of horror sequels do. One of the reasons I felt Screams 2 and 3 worked well, despite their flaws, is because the setting influenced the story. With the return to Woodsboro in Screams 4 and 5, I feel like it's done for nostalgic purposes, not for the benefit of the story. I rank the Origin Story trilogy higher than the Woodsboro trilogy because I think it's amazing how much of a backstory Williamson gave a single horror movie, and how he developed just the right amount of details for there to be enough flexibility to build upon in subsequent films. This trilogy is very similar to the Origin Story trilogy, but the reason I rank it higher is because of how closely it ties into Maureen. Specifically, we get a glimpse at how other family members besides Sidney and Neil were affected by Maureen's death, and the legacy brought on by her brutal murder. There's substance and emotion to this, and it really highlights how the aftermath of a tragic event lingers for several years. Similar to the backstory of the Roberts family as well as the Prescott family in previous Scream films, Scream 5 introduced audiences to a much deeper side to not only the Loomis family, but also Billy in a spiritual sense. The gap between 3 generations really captured the legacy aspect of these tragedies, and it reminds us that a killer's loved ones are also victims. And finally, the original trilogy. To me, Scream 1 is a masterpiece, and it set up hints on how the story could move forward for a subsequent film, allowing Scream 2 to unfold naturally, making Sidney's tale an unlikely saga. From there, Scream 2 introduced Stab, a concept that needed a film of its own to examine. And while that film was by no means perfect, it pushed the story forward, resisting the pressure to predictably return to Woodsboro. Yet, it gave us a final scene to bring everything full circle and also mock the concept of perfectly closing all doors. And with those doors staying open forever, since Scream has now become an unstoppable force, I can't wait for the next installment, and I look forward to always having something to talk about with all of you. More Scream content to come. Until next time, thanks as always for watching.